You had this Lifeblood album, which I think was very introspective, very looking back at the moment. You had your solo projects. Can you tell me in which state the band is now after these experiences?
I think we're just all absolutely just so happy to be with each other, to be honest. We took a break because, you know, our band has been together for so long. You know, we wrote our first song together in 1985, I think. You know, we've been together over 20 years. So we just needed to take a break to get perspective from something that we had been so close to for so long. But, you know, after we had done our solo projects and then came back together, it was a relief. And also I realized that, you know, actually playing music with the Manics is a challenge because, you know, when I did the solo thing, it was kind of, the music was easier to play on stage. But as soon as you step on stage with the Manics, it's heavier and it's a lot more competitive between the three of you. And I kind of enjoy that. I miss the physical challenge of playing in the Manic Street Preachers. And I must say, you know, it's amazing that, you know, I've known Sean since I was 1 year old. I've known Nick since I was 4 years old. And we still all just absolutely love each other's company. It's a very rare thing to actually still have the same friends that you grew up with and also work with them.
So it's your eighth album, and one could say it's the autumn of the band, or the winter is drawing here. But are you still hungry?
Yes, definitely. I think kind of like, you know, deep down, most musicians are pathetic people that need love. And I don't think we're any different. I'm not saying that we crave massive success anymore, the way that we used to. But I still think that kind of, if you kind of go through like the cerebral process of writing lyrics and writing songs and putting them together and then performing them, at some point you want someone to say they love it, I suppose, or you want to feel as if you've connected with your audience. And I think deep down, you know, musicians are quite insecure people, and they need validation through their music and through people connecting with their music. So judging hunger on that level, I think it's always present. I think that musicians basically are those people. So yes, I'm still hungry to actually connect with the crowd and get a reaction from them, especially when it's your own crowd and they've grown up with you. And I don't feel as if it's the autumn of my years. You know, it's really strange. I've never needed therapy in my life ever, but I think the one thing that could push me into therapy is actually somebody telling me that I couldn't play music with Nick and Sean ever again. I think that would send me reeling into therapy, years of it. So on all different levels, my desire to actually be creative with Nick and Sean still, and actually to connect with an audience, I still feel really kind of up for the physical challenge of that.
Can you describe, looking back onto the Lifeblood situation, what put the band in this situation to create such a record, which I still think Lifeblood is a good record, but totally different?
It was a strange kind of thing. I think from around about 2001, after we'd had, you know, 5 solid years of success and selling lots of records and playing like arena tours, I think strangely we stopped to doubt ourselves, or we became slightly embarrassed at what we stood for. So from 2001 onwards, we started trying to find a different version of ourselves. We started trying to be a different band, and then that came to a peak on Lifeblood, where, you know, we were never using the first idea. We were using our second or third or fourth or even our 5th idea. It was a painstaking process. We were trying to find something that was hidden in ourselves. And that's why I like listening to Lifeblood. It's interesting because it's different to the rest of our albums, because the process we went through to make it was very different. But I couldn't make that album twice in a row because there was just too much thought process. We weren't physically engaged. You know, that's what we loved about rock and punk music when we were young. It was very physical music, and you could see the way, even though you heard the music, you could see the way the person played it in the studio by listening to the record, even when you closed your eyes. But with Lifeblood, I don't get that. It's almost like Lifeblood is an album that you feel as if you're invading its privacy when you listen to it. So on one hand, that's why I actually find Lifeblood easy to listen to, because it's interesting. It's us in a different shape, but I couldn't do that 2 albums in a row. You know, at some point I need the physical release of being more instinctive.
That's my impression too. It's a very physical album you got there with Send Away the Tigers.
Yeah.
And can you tell me about the title? What does it mean?
Basically, kind of, it's It's a quote from a famous British comedian called Tony Hancock, who was kind of one of the most famous people in Britain in the late 50s and 60s. He was a household name, and he was revered and kind of seen as a messianic character of British entertainment. But of course, as is with many other comedians, he was laughing on the outside and falling apart on the inside. And he had a lot of demons. He became an alcoholic. He was a very insecure person. But also, when through the insecurity, sometimes that would turn into supreme hubris, like arrogance. And he went through a process of sacking everybody that he'd ever worked with and that had given him success. And he sacked all his writers, and he moved to Australia to start again. And he ended up committing suicide and stuff. And Nick kind of saw a correlation between Tony Hancock and Tony Blair, the tale of the two Tonys, where somebody goes through the process of deconstructing themselves and feeling as if they're ashamed of what they stand for, and then ultimately destroying themselves. And they become remembered for something negative rather than the positive things they stood for. And the same with Tony Blair. His prime ministership started off on such a positive note, and he did a lot of good things. Politically, he created devolution in Scotland and partly in Wales, kept the Northern Ireland peace process on track, put more money into education and National Health Service than any other prime minister in British history. But then the Iraq War came along, and I think some of perhaps Tony Blair's beliefs guided him to a wrong place. So, forever history will judge him in a negative way rather than they'll judge him on the negative things that he stood for rather than the positive things. And I think we kind of saw that in us a tiny bit. We've got a long checkered history where we have said and done stupid things sometimes as a band. And also there's the ever-present reminder of what the band we would be if Richey was still around. People still judge us by Richey sometimes. And I think, the phrase "send away the tigers" that Tony Hancock used, we felt it was relevant to us. We felt as if sometimes you've got to kind of stop questioning yourself, and you've actually got to return to your truer nature and choose the path of just resolving all those issues and go down the path of just being true to yourself rather than destroying yourself through self-doubt or through supreme arrogance. Sorry, that was a real long answer. Sorry.
No, never mind. So you would say the demons will never go away, but sometimes you would stop thinking about them. And what would the demons be for the band?
I think that for a band like us, perhaps your demons stand for a lot of different things. Nick and Richey have said some contentious things in their time, which some of which we regret. And then, also we stood for making grand, bold statements like, we would sell 17 million records and then disband after one album. Obviously, that didn't work out. We went to Cuba and played in front of Fidel Castro, and then we returned to Britain. And when we returned, the reaction was ultimately very cynical. People thought that, we were coming back and saying that now we were part of the Brotherhood. And that wasn't the case. But people kind of judged us for going to Cuba in a very negative way, but we saw it as an adventure. And also then, all those things to live up to. People think that we're just a bunch of loudmouthed, arrogant people. I just don't. I think that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you've got to try and dispel that image, because I think we're very human as people. We just had a lot of ambitions, and we made a lot of mistakes trying to achieve those ambitions. So I think that's what the demons are sometimes. People actually assuming things about you, but in reality they've created an alternate reality of you rather than the truth, I suppose. And also, there's the bittersweet taste of success, of having so much success but without Richey. That'll always be with us. But you can kind of start to resolve that as you get older, I suppose.
What does excess mean for you as a band?
Excess for me meant, I remember just thinking around about 1996, when we started selling more records, I remember thinking that it meant that I could drink more expensive whiskey than I could before, and I drank lots and lots of it, and so that lasted for a long time. But no, my problem was I was never an alcoholic. I was just a good drinker. I was a really, really happy drunk, and I didn't need to drink until 7 o'clock the next night, and then I would drink until 3 o'clock the next morning. I remember that was success for me. I remember thinking, wow, I can drink a really expensive whiskey now and see if it tastes better than the cheaper whiskey. And that was an experiment that lasted for a long time.
Your first single, could you tell me what the lyrics are all about?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Nick calling me on the phone, and he told me that he'd written a lyric that transferred from his head. He said he was having this dialogue in his head, but which was like a dual narrative. It was like a conversation between him and Richey, and he said it was it almost turned into an exercise in how he used to write with Richey. They would talk about something, or they'd argue about something. Then they would sit at a desk like you and I are now, and they would write at a desk with each other. And he said he'd had this kind of conversation in his head like he used to have with Richey, and he turned it into a lyric. And so therefore it became a duet kind of thing. He said he couldn't hear anybody else singing it except myself and Nina Pearson from the Cardigans. And I was like, well, I said to him, that'll never happen. And he was just like, oh, well, the worst you can do is say no, it's just ask. And then she said yes, and it was just one of those little things that come off. Usually things go wrong, they don't go right. But with this song, Your Love Alone Is Not Enough, as soon as we asked her to sing the other part in the song, everything just went right. And it was like serendipity, it was almost like fate. It was just a really cool moment.
Which way do you relate as a band today to working class?
It's hard. It's undeniably more difficult to relate to your origins or your roots as you get older, because obviously you start living a different life to the one that you were brought up with, and you start earning more money. I mean, that's just a fact. But I think there are a couple of tests as to how you can sort of define your political beliefs compared to the way you were brought up. And I think the big test for people, if they believe in any kind of old school socialism that used to exist in Britain, is taxation. When I was young, I believed in high taxes when I had no money. I didn't really have any money until I was 24, something like that. And every time I voted, I voted on the basis of believing in high taxation, of the fact that people that earned more should be taxed more to give people amenities such as education, health, roads, whatever. That the money should bleed back down to people that had less. So I believed in high taxation when I had no money, and I still believe in high taxation now I have money. I think, there's still a massive culture in Britain of people hating taxes. They think it's my money and that person can't have any more money. And I think, that's just not right. For me, the last vestige of socialism is that you've got to believe in high taxes. And we do.
So you wouldn't sing Taxman instead of...
No, I would never sing Taxman, no. Definitely not.
What qualifies a band to do political statements?
Nothing too heavy. I think you've got to just find politics entertaining. I think you've got to enjoy them. This program in Britain. There's two programs that I watch in Britain all the time. There's one program on BBC Two called Newsnight, which I watch every time it's on, or try to. And there's a program called This Week. And I just find them really good programs. I find them entertaining, and I find them interesting, and some of the things on there make me laugh. I think that's a good place to start. If you can actually treat some of the politicians as almost like actors or musicians, then you can actually get into it, And I think that's what I grew up with. My parents would always watch a program called Question Time on British TV, which would be on Thursday nights back then, and my mother and father always watched it. And that's how I got into it, I suppose. I think that's a good place to start.
We will have a huge debate, I think, in Germany, because there's the G8 summit of the mighty people, and they built a fence around the town that will be at the at the Baltic Sea, and the fence will be about 12 kilometers long. It will only have 2 gates for the people living there to get into. And right now there are about 300 organizations going to protest against. the summit.
Yeah.
And they will have huge music concerts, great things, 2 or 3 things. Tom Morello will be there, and international bands, and all German bands. Do you think this works? This will have any effect?
It's hard to know, actually. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. But kind of like, the one thing I do know is that kind of, that, where the cultural elites exist everywhere. Whether it be in like, in the Pan-Pacific region, or whether it be in Europe, or whether it be in Eastern Europe, or whether it be in Africa, cultural elites will always exist, and they'll always protect themselves. And, it always takes more than a song to infiltrate the kind of like, the atmosphere that the cultural elite lives in. I admire people that actually think that a concert can make a difference, because it means that they're full of hope and they're full of fight. I don't know if it does, really.
So why then political commitment anyway?
I think just to be politically committed to yourself is enough. I think. I just call me naive, but I come from a background where I have more faith in politicians than I do musicians. A lot of politicians I grew up with did good things, and they stood by their beliefs even when they were inconvenient to themselves. Give me a good politician rather than a good musician any day. I think, perhaps I'm naive, perhaps I'm optimistic, but, I get excited when I think about somebody like Gordon Brown as Prime Minister, if he could win. But that's because I like politics, so I don't know.
So coming to that, and perhaps looking out to the future, I think this album shows a band being at the very point of it being itself, and recovering from some kind of seeking, and being really itself. I think that's what these emotions I get when I listen to it.
I mean, there's a couple of songs on there which are culturally engaged, or engaged with the time that we live in, but a lot of it is just a big dumb rock album. I think that's the other thing we realised, as a band in the past. Yes, we have sometimes tried to have high ideals, and we've tried to kind of fuse our ambitions with our ideas and with our beliefs, but then other times we've just been a big dumb rock band. But a song like You Love Us is just a big dumb rock song. It's kind of a song like, Motown Junk is a big dumb rock song. And I think we got back to that as well. We just got back to, just feeling as if we were in a rock and roll band. There's a famous Marky Smith quote, Marky Smith from The Fall, where he said that kind of like, the rock means nothing without the roll. And it's true. He said, there are way too many bands that just rock these days, and it means nothing without the roll. And I think the roll just stands for a sense of fun, or it stands for just like actually having a bit of grace, and just not just being about the power. There's a certain attitude that you've got to try and articulate. So, I think we enjoyed making this album. It says enough, it's engaged enough with its time for me to be proud of it, but it's also big and dumb and loud enough for me to enjoy it as well.
So your band was a history, and where do you see the Manics in the future? Will you keep this momentum of being...
Momentum's a very hard word for kind of like a band on their 8 albums to get their head round on their 8th album. I think perspective is our current perspective, and knowing ourselves is more important than momentum. I think if you're a band like us that has played so much together, and you know each other inside out, you quickly gather momentum. It's fine when you know each other so well like we do. Momentum's something you get easily. I think to know yourself and to be reconciled with perhaps some of your demons, etc., is more important.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Very kind that you got
pleasure.
time for us.